Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Nevers Podcast. This is part 2. This time, it's personnel. As always, you can find us at the Nevers Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the usual places. And you can subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Stitcher. With me, as always, is my two amazing co-hosts, Gina and Denis. Sadly, Kelly couldn't make it today, but she's with us in spirit. Say hi, everyone.
Hey, this is Dennis. Saying hey, getting ready to talk about these.
Hey everyone, it's Gina. Super excited about these new cast members.
We don't have any other topics to discuss. There is nothing. All we are here for today is to talk about casting. So, without further ado, let's jump in.
I just found out about a cast member that I'm actually really excited about, so I can't wait until we get to that person.
Cool. Is it Elizabeth Barrington?
Yes.
I looked through her IMDb and I was like, oh, Gina's gonna be all over this one.
Oh my god, I'm freaking out right now.
First on the list is Kiran Sonia Sawar, who will be playing Harriet Kaur. A young Scottish Sikh, Harriet lives with the orphans but is accepted by both her family and her betrothed. Optimistic without being naive, Harriet is determined to live her life as she's planned, despite its increasing weirdness. Sawar has held parts in Black Mirror, Silent Witness, and had a standout role in the gritty BBC drama Murdered by My Father. This seems to be her first major recurring role, so I'm looking forward to see what she can do when she's able to sink her teeth into a character. Anyone else have any thoughts on this?
Just the description makes me feel like it's the kind of character who, just based on, oh, I'm accepted by my family, but I live with the orphans. Like, sounds like the kind of character who, when is hanging out with you, is like, oh, we're slumming it. And you're like, no, this is my life.
Kind of a Victorian.
I choose to live with orphans.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that contrast that she chooses it, and she's fine with her family life, and she's with someone, so that's going to be a really interesting conflict with her and the others.
I'm wondering, they says, yeah, she's accepted by her family and her betrothed. Do you think that maybe the kind of the acceptance may be one way? Like, her family are like, oh yeah, it's great, she's got powers, it's wonderful. And she's like, oh my god, these guys are so embarrassing. Why do they have to be like this? I'm gonna go hang out with the orphans. They understand me. They don't have to worry about all this parent nonsense that I have to deal with.
I wish I was an
orphan. The problem with that is if they do take that path, she may come off as maybe not an unlikable character, but a bit sort of selfish.
Yeah, well, it's a really large cast. You gotta have some like jerks in the cast. I don't know if this character is or not, but
probably, yeah. I mean, it says optimistic without being naive, so I mean, she does sound like quite a nice character, but I'm just wondering if they're not hiding something beneath the surface. Can't wait to find out.
And I love that she's Scottish. Cool.
It's good to know that they are bringing in characters from, or it's not just going to be a collection of Cockney roughnecks. There's people from all over England. Yeah, very excited to see what we can do with her. The second new actress is Elizabeth Barrington. Barrington plays Lucy Best. Dirt poor, adaptive, and streetwise, there's nothing delicate about Lucy. As she's given up thieving to live with the orphans, her quick wit and high spirits mask the pain of a tragic past. An absolute mainstay of British TV, her IMDb is extensive. Long-running parts on school drama Waterloo Road, as well as guest spots on Doctor Who, Black Mirror, and also she played the wife of psychotic mob boss Harry in 2008's horrifically underrated dark comedy In Bruges, one of my all-time favourite movies. I'm very excited for this character. I think she's going to be very, very fun. I know Gina in particular has a lot to say about this, so I will cede the floor to you.
Okay, so I mentioned in a previous podcast that I'm beyond obsessed with Good Omens, and she plays Dagon, Lord of the Flies. So she's basically Beelzebub's kind of like sidekick, in the hell world, and she's incredible. And even just her being in Good Omens, and she has a small role, but she's so memorable and amazing. And the great thing about Good Omens is that even if everyone has small roles, they feel really like complex characters. But she's definitely someone I remember, and yeah, I'm just kind of geeking out that like my Good Omens and Joss Whedon world is like colliding a little bit right now. So
She's also in the Doctor Who episode that Neil Gaiman wrote, so she's got that double Gaiman cred.
This does seem like quite a classic Whedon character. Quick wit, high spirits, tragic past. I don't mean to be that guy, but looking at some of these characters, he doesn't really seem to be stretching himself in terms of new origin stories.
And the like dirt poor adaptive streetwise sounds like, well, if you're gonna do a Victorian era thing, that's what you need. Like that also seems to be like you're living in this comfort world of cliches for this time. But that's
and again,
fine.
we've got another very loaded surname joining Malady. That's the one, and then there was Best. Now it's like it's all they're all lining up. I have to wonder: is Whedon trying to subtly sort of pass us a message along through these names, or does he just like the sound of them and we're vastly overthinking everything?
yes, it doesn't seem like Joss is stretching himself, but at the same time, since it's been so long that he's had a TV show, I'm kind of okay with him having familiar characters.
True, we have to remember one of Joss Whedon's absolute strengths is creating amazing characters. You know, it doesn't matter whether they're heroes, villains, anti-heroes, sidekicks, henchmen, they're always memorable and intriguing and interesting. So even if he is maybe relying on forms he's used before, that doesn't necessarily mean they'll be dull or cliche characters. He's always going to put his little twist, his shocker in there to surprise us with what we previously assumed to be quite a generic character.
Well, and I mean, characters are always going to sound generic when you have two sentences to rely on. And I mean, this is something I've been thinking about recently also, of like every artist or creator has their tropes or themes they go back to. So to like, I don't know, and what's wrong with that? That's like how people write and how people draw. Like you wouldn't expect to see like a Hopper painting that's like of a sci-fi landscape, you know? Like we all, I don't know, we all have our things we return to as creators and as storytellers. So it's like...
That's actually a really excellent point. Like when a musician sticks to one genre, we don't criticize them. When an artist sticks to a particular style, we don't criticize them. But then when like an actor does the same like roles, they're typecast, and somehow that's bad, even if the role they play is good.
And even like when a director does change genres or something, they're still going to have elements of their style coming through. Like David Lynch doing a straight story, like still, even though it's like a more like set in a regular world story, still feels like a Lynch movie.
You know, that's a really good point. And I feel like Joss in the first Avengers film, and probably in everything he's done, he has similar shots, but that doesn't take me out of it. If anything, I'm like, oh man, that looks like that shot from that one Buffy episode. Like, I think it's cool. It means he has a style.
Yeah.
And a lot of excellent points there. Next up is a character I am very much looking forward to seeing in shows. I think they're going to be very, very fun. Is Ella Smith, who will be portraying Desiree Blodgett, a whore and an increasingly popular one. Her power makes men tell her everything on their minds, and they come away relieved in more than one sense. Unfortunately, what she's heard may get her killed, even though, honestly, she doesn't listen to most of it. She is devoted to her 6-year-old son, who, bless him, never speaks. You'll recognise Ella Smith from appearing in the somewhat disastrous Off the Record, as well as the far more successful Ray and Liz. I have a distinct suspicion this character is going to be very well received. I can almost picture the scene now. They're sort of in her boudoir, laid around, smoke and sweat in the air. The man is just reeling off all these funny things that he's done, and then suddenly, in a classic Whedon way, there'll be a turn, and he'll be like, "Oh yeah," and then I killed someone.
Right.
And there'll just be an immediate switch where it goes from, "Oh, this is so funny," he's talking about how he loves feet, and then I use those feet to stamp on their throat. And it's like, Whoa! Where the hell did that come from?
Yeah, and it sounds like she's got an honesty power or something.
Right.
The only thing in her IMDb I recognize is Burke and Hare, or at least have seen, and that was good. Yeah, don't remember her from it though, but it's been a while since I've seen that.
I've also seen her. She was in Benedict Cumberbatch's and Johnny Lee Miller's Frankenstein, directed by Danny Boyle, it's probably one of the best plays that I'll ever watch. And I don't remember her either, but if she was in that cast, like if Danny Boyle cast her for a theater role, she's probably amazing.
And it's interesting, again, we're seeing a child. She's devoted to her 6-year-old son.
Mm-hmm.
It really does seem like it's not just the themes of this show that are more mature. It's very much a story of families. This is like the third family in a row we've had. He's really dialing up the stakes of these characters so much higher. Like, this isn't, like high school drama. This isn't a detective agent. This is like people and their lives and their families' lives in constant risk. And then juxtaposed with the main characters that are all orphans and as such have no connection to their family anymore, except for each other. Some serious drama there.
Yeah.
I also love the fact that her power, even though she honestly doesn't listen to most of what the men are saying, that's actually really interesting. Because usually when someone has a power, they like hone in on it and use it. But it's like, look, I have a superpower, but I don't even need it because I don't care. Like, I kind of love that.
I can already see her as a kind of, maybe not sassy, it's that word's been overused, but kind of very assured Victorian whore.
Which is awesome.
Next up, we have Viola Pritterjohn, who will be playing Myrtle Haplich, a middle-class girl rescued from a family who cannot understand her, literally, as she can no longer speak English, or anything resembling speech. She's thrilled to be living at the orphanage, where she's everyone's favourite weird little mascot. Her IMDb currently has 2 shows listed. One of them is The Nevers. But apparently she is going to be in the soon-to-be-cancelled Netflix adaptation of the popular RPG series The Witcher. Her character, again, it sounds like classic Whedon. It's another sort of mascot-type character. The one problem I can see, and it's a problem with any of those characters that kind of only speak their own language or speak gibberish or yada yada yada, is where do you go from there? If for the entire run of the series did she just speak nothing but nonsense? Or does she eventually get past whatever's caused that and start to speak English? Because if she does that kind of undercut her character in that she was the gibberish one and now she speaks normally? But if she doesn't, how much can you actually do with a character that's never able to communicate?
Yeah, all I can say with this, if this is like her full character, I hope she doesn't get too much screen time.
Yeah.
It could really, like, hearing a full 15 minutes of gibberish is a lot,
I feel like with episode Hush, I feel like obviously Joss is really good at verbal communication and verbal cues, or I'm sorry, not verbal, physical. So I feel like she probably won't have too many lines, but she'll do a lot of things physically, which is really cool. It's just a different kind of character than we usually see in like big popular shows. I personally see, hopefully by the end of like season 1 or like this powerful emotional moment, something has to happen where then she starts speaking English. But like Taheg said, if she does start speaking English, there has to be like a consequence or something, so it doesn't make it seem like it's been pointless that she hasn't been able to this whole time.
Yeah, and this might be another, like, a mystery or something, because she could be speaking, like, just as an example, like an alien language that is a clue to, like, aliens being there. I mean, not that there's indication this is an alien show, or, like, maybe she speaks to technology, but technology doesn't, like, exist yet. That would,
I just had a thought. Do you remember in the Powers article, I did a thing about omnilingualism? What if it's not that she can't speak, it's that she can speak everything, but because it all just hit her immediately, she can't quite process the differences between the different languages yet, so she's just kind of trying to speak in everything all at once, and then over the course of the series she'll kind of either by, as you said, Gina, some kind of emotional impact, or just with time and effort, she'll eventually begin to kind of tease out those strands and separate them out into the different languages, And then over the course of the series, she'll start to speak English, but she'll also start to speak everything else. Kind of once she learns to harness her power.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Because as someone commented, they did say that Joss did mention omnilingualism as one of his favourite powers. So that would be a very Joss way to kind of sneak it in under the radar.
Right. And actually, that'd be cool if at first you don't think she's speaking any languages. Like, you think she's just like mumbling or like it's indistinguishable. And then eventually, maybe someone's like, wait a minute, that kind of sounded like this language. That kind of sounded like this language. Like, that'd be kind of cool if they like slowly peppered it in.
I mean, there's people in the show from various different countries. It could be that she's speaking gibberish because she's actually speaking like Afrikaans or Korean. And then when someone is like, oh, wait, I know that language. Then suddenly you sort of realise that she's not speaking English, but she is speaking a language. We just don't know what that language is.
Right.
So I've now done a complete 180 on that character. I was thinking it should be quite annoying, but I think she could be incredibly interesting if they play it properly.
And again, it's cool that she's not in too many things. I love when big directors take unknowns and like give them a chance, because everyone has to start somewhere. So, and you know, she seems like she's young, but it's still cool to see unknowns.
Definitely. So it's like, it's always a risk to just cast someone that's got sort of 2 credits, but it's been shown in the past, especially with HBO shows, who, you know, 80% of Game of Thrones were unknowns.
Yeah.
A good portion of True Blood were relative unknowns. It can pay off, and when it does pay off, it tends to pay off quite hugely, especially for the actors themselves. Next up, we have Anna Devlin, who is playing Primrose Chataway. All 16-year-old Primrose wants is to be a proper, ordinary girl and not take up too much space, which at 10 feet tall is hard. Most everything is either dreamy, unfair, or just too embarrassing to live through. You'll recognise Anna. She was very briefly in the last season of 12 Monkeys, which is my favourite show I can't watch the end of because the world hates me. She's, again, is another actress with very, very little on her IMDb. But as we've just covered, that may not necessarily be a huge problem. But one thing which did really stand out from that description is 10 feet tall.
Yeah.
What the hell? How'd they just slip that one in mid-sentence like it's nothing? What? Got a giant in our midst. How'd you gonna do with that?
Yeah, that sounds. I mean,
Sorry, have you guys read the season 8 Buffy comics?
That was my first thought exactly, yeah.
It almost reminds me of Dawn. Obviously, Dawn was a lot more than 10 feet tall, but I really do love that concept. And really geeky side note, Joss helped this one singer-songwriter with her album, and he co-wrote a song called Big Giant Me. And it's about this person that's really tall. And I'm really interested if, like, when he wrote that, if he was starting to think about this character or not. I don't know. It was probably like 5 years ago, but that's really interesting.
The thing that's quite interesting for me about this is, so far, all the powers that we know have been attributed, you know, the voice, the fire, etc., the truth-telling, they're all quite subtle, undercover, easy-to-hide powers. And now we have Paul Primrose, who's 10 feet tall. There's no hiding that. There's no being subtle with that power.
yeah.
It's gonna be quite interesting to see how the rest of the team deal with this giant teenage girl who apparently thinks everything is unfair.
And that sounds to me like the most like X-Men feeling power of like, oh, I'm 16 and I'm so awkward and I'm a giant. Like the thing of like being so uncomfortable in your own body. Like, you know, you just had this terrible growth spurt. You don't even know how to walk anymore.
Yeah, even filming wise, it's gonna be really cool. Like, I already can't wait for like behind the scenes stuff of like how they deal with this, you know?
Yeah.
Like, does she have to stand on a box? Do they have to? I don't know.
I'm hoping they have hired a few of the cinematographers from Lord of the Rings, because they did great work with the Hobbits. This is sort of the opposite of that, and use a lot of forced perspective, and I think that's going to be very fun to see how they work around that, both in the show and in filming. Last but by no means least, we have Martin Ford, who will be playing Nicholas Purble, aka Odium, the quintessential henchman. He looks as unpleasant as he smells, a side effect of his rather surprising turn. Will do any kind of work for anybody's money. Looking at his IMDb, Ford has been in a lot of shows and a lot of films where he can walk around with no shirt on and punch people. He's very, very large, muscly man. I don't think this role is going to be very different to everything he's been in so far, but I have a feeling he will be right up there with Primrose in the "this power is not easy to hide." A side effect of his rather surprising turn. I'm guessing he's like a fish monster or swamp thing or something.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is I hope this is an opportunity for a practical effect. I'd love to see some monster makeup on this, and I wonder what it is, like Gorilla Man or something.
He looks as unpleasant as he smells. I'm thinking either Monkey Man or Fish Man. The thing is, Umbrella Academy have already done Monkey Man, so I think they'll probably go more kind of Swamp Thing than Primate.
He's got like face tattoos or near face tattoos. So I think that to me is a good indication he's got to have some makeup on, because that doesn't like strike me as Victorian to have these full neck tattoos.
It's pretty badass though.
I also love the will do any kind of work for anybody's money. Like, I love characters that obviously he seems like a villain, but maybe at some point he might help the Nevers a little bit, or maybe not. I don't know. I love characters like that.
I mean, the quintessential henchman. I can see him being a little bit like, what was the name of the guy in Buffy with all the skin folds?
Clem.
Yes, thank you, Clem. Being a bit like Clem, kind of. He hangs around. He never quite, because it was worth noting. Ford/Odium is the only character listed that is not listed as a main. He's listed as a recurring character, not a lead. All the others so far, I feel a bit sorry for him. Literally every other character we've announced so far in both our casting casts has been listed as, I believe, as a main or lead role. Odium is the only recurring character, meaning he won't be in every episode. He'll probably be in about half to 3/4 of the episode. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was just kind of hired muscle for both or either side, rather than a kind of continuous force in the show.
Yeah, he sounds like a classic heavy. The characters need to fight. Level 1 boss.
What I like about even the villains' descriptions is that all of them seem like outsiders, even the villains, which is really interesting.
Very much so. They're all sort of very fringe characters, with the exception probably of the two people from the last cast who we tipped to be the baddies, which were the surgeon and the peer.
Yeah, but even them, they kind of have something that makes them not like stand out, but sort of like, I guess they're kind of characters that can't really relate to a lot of people.
Because even with the other two, he was like a super gifted, massively talented surgeon. That's gonna put a bit of distance between him, simply because like all his colleagues will be like, oh, there's old Mr. Flash thinks he's better than us because he's come over from America. And then the peer who used to be a general, who I still think is going to have some kind of dark secret, possibly a power. It could be that sort of those in the inner circle are shunning him now because of whatever caused him to move from general to peer. There are so many freaking layers to this show, it's insane.
Yeah, this is a massive cast. I mean, it's 18 or I guess 17 regulars already. That seems huge to me for a show we don't know much about yet, really, other than these character descriptions. I mean, we're already at Game of Thrones level cast size, you know.
I have to assume that this is gonna again. It sucks we have to keep referencing it, but it is sort of our biggest point of reference. Much like Game of Thrones, I think we're going to be seeing 2, possibly 3 stories in their separate arcs that may cross over and converge at some point. I think there's going to be the orphanage where we've got the various orphans and hangers-on and ne'er-do-wells. Then there will probably be a sort of underworldy type story with Nick Frost, with Odium, with the Pyromancer and the Hooker. And then to counterbalance that, we're going to have an upper class story with the Doctor, the orphanage owner, the General, and the Surgeon. Although it is quite a large cast and there are crossovers between all of them, there does seem to be three distinct kind of strata evolving between the announced cast members. Kind of the middle grounds, the underground, and the upper class.
And only the audience will have the full view.
As it should be.
As it should be, yeah. But it's interesting because I feel like Joss usually doesn't work in that structure, you know? Usually a lot of the characters interact every single episode. But with these many cast members, I feel like there has to be those three different worlds. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they deal with that.
I think there will certainly be some level of crossover. For instance, you've got your favourite character, the pansexual posh boy, who is Hugo Swan. We've got Mr. Swan, who is upper class, so he will be able to rub shoulders with the Surgeon and the General, but also he's obsessed with powered folk, so he will be working with Amalia and the Nevers, and then they will be trying to survive, so they will have to, by virtue of it's the way the world works, they will probably be dealing with the Beggar King and his various ne'er-do-wells, because that's the only way they can kind of get by in the world. Then there'll be the policeman trying to chase them all down because he just wants to enforce the law.
Oh, okay. So in any storytelling seminar or anything, they always say if you create great characters, then the plots come from characters. So characters drive plot, characters drive conflict, and like this show is the perfect example for that, because again, like in our last podcast when we talked about the previous cast, we're already coming up with storylines and all we have are the character descriptions. Like, it's amazing.
It really is. Like, I don't understand how with, less than a paragraph, like 2 sentences for each character, just between the two of us and now adding in Denis, we've come up with enough plots for about the first 3 seasons. Like, it's insane. Like, it's all there.
Our poor fan fiction brains just can't help it. Oh, so that definitely needs to go on the Nevers website.
I've always had to see some very interesting interactions between the characters. Desiree being the one, obviously, who I really want to see with everyone, just because I want to see how kind of the honesty she can bring out in them. It'd be quite fun to see her with the General, who I still think has some dark secret. It'd be interesting if that's how it finally comes out. Although, her power makes men tell her everything on their minds. I'm wondering, will it work on the ladies? Or is it just phrased that way because she's a whore and works with men and she's used it so far on men?
Right.
Well, that could get her into trouble with the other workers in the whorehouse if she's constantly making them tell secrets to their clients. That could be a lot of trouble, but hilarious.
I do like the idea of like somebody whose powers aren't even like that. Not only do they want them, but they're not suited to their personality. Like, because like if you think about like a psychic, usually is like super smart, but if like a psychic is also dumb and is like if it's somebody who's like, I'm in a line where I want secrets. It's
a good contrast to her character, and then like Taheg said, like so another really good storytelling technique is having the audience know things that the characters don't. So it feels like the audience is like a step ahead in a way. It would be great, like Taheg said, if eventually, obviously the audience knows her superpower, and then eventually the General goes to her, and I could just imagine like having a viewing party of the episode, and like right before that happens, we'd be like, oh, like everyone freaking out.
It'd be quite interesting to see Desiree and Swan get together. A woman that can make anyone tell the truth, and a man with a sideline in blackmail. It's a powerfully dangerous combination. This really does seem like it is Joss's chance to just shoot for the moon. With every new piece of information we're finding out, it's adding depth, it's adding breadth, it's adding possibility to these characters and this world. I honestly can't think of a time I've been more excited for a show when the show hasn't even been filmed yet. There's no trailers to watch. There's no real kind of hype to build on, and yet still the hype has reached unbearable levels just based on the few scraps we know. So you have to wonder now, is that it? Do we have our world now? Or do you think there's going to be one or possibly more casting announcements yet to come?
Oh, who knows? Yeah, I was already saying this is a large cast, but yeah, it could keep going, right?
I mean, we've only got one recurring character so far. It could be there'll be another kind of 5 or 6 characters that have smaller parts within the world. It's also worth noting, because they've just finished filming episode 1 and have now gone on a break before they film episodes 2 to 10. You have to wonder if these casts have been announced now because they're not in the first episode and they will be playing parts in the later arcs of the season.
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious, like we haven't heard about any other directors coming on for episodes 2 through 10. So I wonder if Joss is doing all of it.
It does sort of seem like he might be. In all the articles I'm seeing, it's got written by, Whedon, Espenson, Petrie, Petty, and then directed by Whedon. I have a distinct suspicion, at least for the first season, he's going to do all 10 episodes.
Which would be great, because I definitely think he's underrated as a director. Like, everyone always talks about how great his writing is, which, duh, of course. But I also feel like he's a phenomenal director. So I would be so happy if he got nominated for an Emmy for directing.
Actually, he needs to be nominated for an Emmy, full stop.
Right. So that'd be great.
He definitely seems to be listed as directing the first episode. But we know next to nothing beyond that point. I have a distinct suspicion they're filming the first one as a sort of proof of concept, and will then farm out the rest of the episodes. That's probably us done for the evening. As always, you can find us at HBO The Nevers on all social medias, anywhere you can find a podcast. We're there. As always, I've been your host, Taheg. I'm not on social media because it smells and looks funny. But my 2 co-hosts are, so I'll hand over to them now and they can tell you all about it. Gina, if you want to do your thing.
Sure. So you can find me on Twitter at Gina Gemini. Gemini is spelled with an E in the middle, Gemeni. Feel free to tweet me about anything as long as it's geeky and fandom related.
And I'm Denis St. John, Denis with 1 N. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter as at DENIS. COMIX. That's Denis Comics. And that's also my .com, and my Patreon, if you want to read my new comics, is Denis St. John, DENISSTJOHN. All right, thanks for having me on, guys.
It's a pleasure as always, dude. And thank you all for tuning in. We will see you soon for the next episode of the Nevers Podcast. Got that sorted relatively quickly. As always, we are on the ball with this.
This episode of the Nevers Podcast was edited by Matthew Yamanashi. The intro and outro music was produced by Guilherme Moraes. We are more than just a podcast. We're a fan community. You can keep up to date on the Nevers and chat with other fans by visiting HBOthenevers.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search HBO The Nevers, all one word, and click that follow button.
The Nevers Podcast is not endorsed by Mutant Enemy, Warner Media Entertainment, or any of its subsidiaries, including HBO Home Box Office, and is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. The Nevers and all names, pictures, and audio clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.